In this video, we're going to continue looking at the useBean statement and just take it to the next level. So what we want is the JSP Advanced useBeans and Standard Actions WAR file, which will contain the code that we're starting with here today. Then there will be one modification we'll make along the way that you'll need to make to see everything in action as well on your site. The last time when we left off, we were working with useBeans, and what we did was we created the ability to log in by setting the beans here on this page. We were logging in, and then we were passing our poster on to the setBeans2, and when they hit that, we were setting the bean with request.get parameter and the specific parameters that were named, and then they were passed into that bean on the property that they were matched to. Well, what we're going to take a look at today is a couple better ways to actually do this. We know that we can use the bean and we can render it, so it's very powerful that way. But what if we don't want to use any scripting or expressions here with request.get parameter? Is there another way that we can do this? And the answer is absolutely. So the useBean tag actually gives us a nice way that we can directly reference those parameters that are coming in. What I've created this time is a page called setBeansWithParameters. And then we'll pass, just like we did before, a user ID and password to setBeansWithParameters2. And on that page, what we'll see is that we can actually use the set property, and we can have the same properties, but we can directly reference the parameter using the param value. Of course, here we're still just setting the value 1 for auth level because we're just assuming that we have some method in place to actually do that login and thereby authenticate the person to auth level 1. So when we run this, what we would see is that the bean actually will work just like it used to, but now we're not using that request parameter anymore. We're actually just naming the parameter directly. So if we do that, we can go to the second link here, and this is just going to be our infinite skills user again. And again, the password is not going to matter because we're not validating. But you can see now that it does take us through setBeansWithParameters2. It says welcome infinite skills when it gets us to the end page. So you might be thinking, wow, that's really nice. Is there an even better way that we can do this? And the answer, of course, is yes, there is. Why would we need to name all the parameters if the system knows that it can set parameters? We don't need to. The system is smart enough to know that if we have parameters, we can actually just set them from the parameters. So we don't have to explicitly name or list every single parameter in that useBean, and we can actually just rely on the system to do it for us. The final page that we'll look at is the setBeans all properties with parameters, which takes us to setBeans all properties with parameters 2 after directing us through a servlet that's going to log in our user and give them the auth level of 1. So let's take a look at all of those. So here's our setBeans with parameter. Again, here's our setBeans all property page. We're going to log in just like we did before. We're going to send the user to the servlet setBeans all properties login user. And on that servlet, what we see is that we pull in the parameters. And here's the tricky part. Because now we're in a servlet, we're actually doing our login. We get our auth level back. But we can't set request parameters in a servlet. It's not possible. It wouldn't make much sense anyway. They're request parameters, and this is handling the request and sending a response. So we aren't setting request parameters anymore. But what we can do is use the query string to pass the parameters on. But what I want to show you is if we're going to implicitly rely on the system, list all our parameters, we can't pass parameter names that don't make any sense anymore. So before we were able to use UID and password, and it knew because we mapped the property directly to that parameter. But now we're going to be passing parameters, and we won't be mapping. We'll just be relying on the system. So we do that by creating our bean just like before, and we just set the property equals star. And this will know to actually implicitly set every property from incoming parameters. Again, the problem is if we don't map them correctly by having the exact name of the property as our parameter, it won't work. So let's do that. Right now it's set up incorrectly. Since we can't use the request parameters anymore, we're using a query string parameter to pass it into the request, which is just the same thing. And so that will work. It's not the best to use if you were passing passwords around, but we're just doing a demonstration here, so it should be okay. So we'll run our index, and this time we'll go to the bottom one, the JSP get with parameters. Here we're going to do infinite skills again, and any password. And it says, welcome null. Oh no, what happened? Well, what happened is that I didn't map my parameters correctly in my request. So let's go back into our servlet. And here, let's expand this. We have our second string already set up and ready to go. So let's go ahead and turn that one on, and we'll turn the top one off. And now what you'll note is that we're actually directly mapping the parameters here to match the property So we're actually still doing that, but this is just a different way to do it. And now we let the system implicitly list all of that for us when we create the bean. So let's go ahead and go back to our index and run it one last time. And here again, we'll use our bottom link. And this is going to be infinite skills. And the password is, again, anything we want. So go ahead and sign in. And now it says, welcome infinite skills. So you can see now we have correctly set our parameters and we were able to leverage the implicit property listing of the JSP set bean.